A whole bunch of new tires, some new wheels. The high-end bike care market's heating up. The UCI is at it yet again. And it looks like prices are dropping across the board. All that and more on this week's episode of Geek Warning, brought to you by the Escape Collective. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Geek Warning. I'm James Huang. We've got a nearly full crew with us here today. Joining me here, physically next to me, actually, is Zach Edwards from the Boulder Gruppetto. Zach, hello.
Hiya.
Dave Rome, all the way from Sydney. How are you?
Well, thank you. Good morning. Good evening.
We're looking at elephant butts on your wall again.
Yes. That's how you know you're in my home office. I have a canvas photo of elephant butts because why not? And also, I didn't manage to photograph their faces.
I was going to say we should clarify that you took that photo.
Yeah. I think it's artsy, but really, it's just a mother elephant with the child elephant, and all you see is their butts. So there you have it.
And also, it's a late night in Ireland for you, Ronan. Thanks for staying up for us.
Yeah, well, there's nothing on my wall behind me because I'm in a different room than usual. So I'm just trying not to wake the rest of the house. So moving from the office downstairs to a quieter room.
How's your garage shaping up, Ronan? Because you basically, you kind of built that.
Yeah, with the plan that would be the part of it would be the home office. And yeah, I think once I got it weatherproofed and finished, I never actually got to doing the inside anymore. So it's it's a continual 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards sort of thing with the inside at the moment, but we're getting there.
Well, one of these days, maybe we'll actually get to see it in person. Skipping this week's episode is Kaylee Fretz. Kaylee, I'm not really sure where he is right now. He's doing some sort of paperwork, I believe.
It's probably worth adding that Kaylee's involvement with Geek Warning will become more and more sporadic.
Indeed. And that was always part of the plan.
Founding a website takes your time.
Well, I do know that he has a bunch of contracts to write out at this point. So, yeah. So it's important stuff. We do have to keep a business running here. Anyway, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we have a whole bunch of news to talk about. Let's start with tires here first, huh? So, Zach, I think you would probably agree with me that I think probably, I don't know, what would you say, half of the bikes that come in here come with Vittoria Corsas of some variety?
I mean, of the road bikes, probably it's usually either those or Conti GP5000s.
Well, Vittoria has gone ahead and redone those tires. They have a new Corsa Pro and Corsa Pro Control to replace the Corsa and Corsa Control. They basically have the same casing materials that they used to have. They still claim to be a 320 TPI. They call it cotton, but it's a polycotton casing. They are tubeless and hookless compatible across the board, at least for hookless for 28 mil and up. They're claimed to be a little bit lighter, certainly claimed to be faster rolling, also said to be quite a bit more puncture resistant by 18 and 19%, which seems like a pretty decent margin. And Ronan and I have been riding on both of these for a little bit. Ronan, what do you think of these so far?
Well, I've been more so riding the Corsa Pros. I did get the controls mounted there, but it just didn't get the time to ride on those all that often. But yeah, I think we summed it up in the article as thin, light, and fast. Wasn't that the way we had summed it up?
I believe
if I remember correctly.
Yep, I
yes,
believe so.
And I mean, for me, I was always a fan of Corsas, but I just found them a little bit too soft, and obviously that was kind of partly what made them so good. But for the roads that I ride on, a little bit too soft, a little bit too cut prone, and then you also had that weird thing where the tread would come away from the sidewall, which was a bit scary. And it seems so far, based on very limited riding, that Vittoria have fixed all 3 of those things, or fixed 2 of those things, and they still feel as supple, as nice to the touch. And yeah, the actual tread coming away from the sidewall thing that can't really be an issue going forward. That seems to be fixed. So for me, so far so good. Although I'm just a little bit left wishing that they were a little bit wider, even if a 28 does measure a 28. The tread cap on it there, it sort of leaves you wishing for a little bit more, doesn't it?
It does seem a little narrow. So I actually just started getting on the Corsa Pro, and I had been riding the Corsa Pro Control. So nice little match there between the two of us. And yeah, I mean, I measured the tread cap also being a little bit narrow. The Corsa Pro Control is a little bit wider at 27 mil across when the tire is inflated, and the Corsa Pro is 25. So yeah, they're quite narrow. Vittoria pretty much admitted that the tread caps are seemingly a little bit narrower. I think they said something to the effect of, adjusting them for modern ETRTO standards or something like that. So they kind of dodged the question a little bit. But yeah, they do seem a little narrow. I should point out that, Zach, would you say that Vittorias, I think, probably have been blowing up a little bit bigger than some people expected based on what was written on the packaging?
Like historically, you mean?
Yeah, historically.
Yeah, I would say they'd run a touch big.
Well, now Vittoria have adjusted the sizing. So they've basically adjusted the sizing so that the tire matches up to a wider reference rim than it used to. So if you are used to running a 28 mil Vittoria and you're expecting it to inflate to 29, 30, maybe even sometimes, these days now a 28 is probably going to measure a 28 if you're starting on like a 19 mil rim or something.
Question on the narrow tread cap. Obviously that's done to, I guess, improve the speed of the tire, the rolling resistance of the tire. There's less rubber interfering with that casing. But can you feel it? Like, have either of you leant into a corner and felt like you're running out of tread?
I mean, I have this weird training session that I do just because it's very, very tough and you feel like you've done a real good workout. But I don't have to go with more than 10 minutes from the back door here. So if it starts raining, I can get home pretty quickly. Basically, it's up and down a hill repeatedly for no reason I promise for no reason other than it's an easy training session to do. But that does involve turning at the bottom of a sharp descent quite a few times, depending on how long I'm out for. And I definitely just did not have the confidence to bank it in, to lean it in as much on these tires as I would have had on others. And I typically use a GP 5000 most often, a few other tires out there. But in terms of comparison, I can only really compare it to the GP 5000. And whether it's in my head or not just yet, I can't really comment. I probably just need to push it a bit further and get a feel for that. But it's certainly in my head at the moment.
Ronan, have you actually looked at the tread cap to see how close you're getting to the edge?
Not really, no. And I'm kind of that was why I've gone down and mounted the controls also, because based on my experience with controls previously, they will just give you a bit more confidence. Anyhow, just with the makeup of that tire. So I would need to take the Corsa Pro that I've now taken off and look at that and see just how far I was pushing it.
I mean, all of the sponsored World Tour teams on Vittoria don't seem to have any problems ripping down hills and corners with the new tires.
Well, you say that, but I'm not sure if you watched the stage of the Giro today, but people crash all the time. Let's not make assumptions about how the Jumbo Visma rider was the only one that crashed on a corner going downhill today. But yeah, we can't say they're not having any bother because we just watched one guy.
It's more likely melted spokes, right?
Yeah. Not with today's conditions. I would say it's more likely wet roads, but yeah. 24 hours ago I could have given you that one, Zach, but not today.
Either way, this is kind of an interesting trend that I feel like we're starting to see a little bit more often because I know Michelin, for one of their tires in particular, ran a pretty narrow tread cap. And then now Vittoria is seemingly going a little bit narrower with their tread cap. And I wonder if, as companies continue to chase lower and lower rolling resistance, I wonder if this is something that we're going to see a little bit more of.
I was just gonna ask, I've not seen these tires in person yet. Is the tread cap the same? Like, do you guys have different size tires? Like, are they using the same tread cap on a 25 mil tire, on a 28, and maybe a 30? Like, is it that kind of thing, or is the tread cap get narrower or wider with a wider tire as well?
That is a good question. I don't have the answer to that right now. I only received 28 mil samples across the board. So that is something that we'll have to follow up on with Vittoria.
That would be really interesting. Because then that would just be like, okay, they're cutting manufacturing costs. If it's a 25 tread cap is the same as on a 28 tire.
I'd be very surprised if it is.
I would too. I mean, I'll follow
up on the older
Vittoria
tires. Some of them were like that on the older courses. They would have like on the printed in the tread or in the tread cap. It would say pressure for this, like a 25, and pressure for a 28 or whatever. And maybe it wasn't all of them. It might have just been tubulars that they did that. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've really inspected them, but
yeah. But no, James, to your point, I think it's some brands are doing it and some brands are going the other way, right? Like some brands are really emphasizing putting a grippy tread almost onto the sidewall, probably knowing it costs them in the watts wars, but at the same time allows you to have a tire that you can really, really bank on without any fear.
I think that's something I've commented. I can't remember if it was this podcast or one of our other podcasts recently, but just talking about tire development and how I think that's going to be not the next frontier. That would be too strong a point to put on it, but I do think we're going to see a lot of development in that area. Whether it's necessary or not might be another thing, but that's maybe at least what we're going to be hearing a lot about in the coming years. And the example I'd given on whichever podcast we were talking about previously was, if you give Ghana 20% more grip going down the Poggio, does he stay with Van der Poel? Which is I think a valid question. Now, obviously, Van der Poel was on these Corsa Pros, so maybe that tells you one thing. And Ghana was on GP 5000s, which, just goes to show you what I know based on what I just said a few minutes ago. But I think that is, an interesting question going forward. Is you've got, it's kind of like we see in all these marginal gains areas. You can go more aero and you maybe gain weight, or you can wax your chain, but you maybe can't do it for an entire World Tour team, or you can optimize, this, that, and the other, but you usually have something else that you give up in at the same time. And are we going to see that going forward, where you maybe give up a bit of rolling resistance, or you maybe increase your rolling resistance a little, but you've got so much more grip that you can make up for it on specific courses, and vice versa. And I think we could all agree that if that does happen and we end up with better and better tires that are just providing more grip, that's a good thing for everybody, beyond the World Tour.
I'm just amused at the idea of having like gravity road tires,
just shredded in one ride.
Yeah, the double down Corsa. I'm mixing brands there, but yeah.
All right. Well, in other news on the tire front, Specialized actually has a new tire called the Mondo.
It's not a tire, James.
I know.
They're marketing it. Don't call it a tire.
What did they call it again, Zach?
Endurance engineering.
It's a tire.
I can't wait to lower pressure in my endurance engineering.
It's a tire. They have a new tire. It's an endurance tire called the Mondo. Specialized, of course, claims it to be the fastest endurance tire around. It's meant to sit in the gap between the turbo range and the Roubaix tire range. The construction's pretty normal for the most part. It's a 120 TPI nylon casing. It's some kind of, quote, woven nanofiber, unquote, non-stretch bead, which I'm guessing it's probably Xylon, which is what most companies seem to be using right now. And of course, they're saying it's like 11% faster than the next closest competitor. They're running a dual density compound. Same compound as their turbo race tires, actually. There's a breaker belt under the tread, and there's sidewall protection for, I guess, extra cut and pinch resistance, apparently. Hooked and hookless compatible, 28, 32, and 35 mil sizes. Weights range from 310 to 360 grams. They're not terribly expensive, all things considered. They're about $80 US, 80 euros. I don't know what it is in Australia or pounds, but that should give you an idea of where these sit.
They're similar in price to a GP 5000 or a Vittoria. So not terribly expensive, but still more expensive than a tire should cost.
Similar range as other high-end stuff right now. Yeah. And bike tires, nice bike tires these days are definitely pretty expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Now, as far as these tires go, I first find it kind of funny that they have revised the Mondo name, because I remember when they used this the first time, and It was like 15 years ago or something. I don't know if any of you remember these, but they tried to build them as sort of like a
MotoGP tire.
Yeah, like modeled after a MotoGP tire and like a similar profile with sort of like a pronounced crown down the center, and then kind of like a little bit more. It was almost kind of like diamond shaped profile. And they were saying like, puts more rubber on the road when you corner and that sort of thing. I mostly thought it just made the tire feel really weird. But I'm happy to say that these are very pleasantly round. And so far, I've only had a few rides on them so far, but they actually feel pretty good.
Yeah. So I guess just to clarify on this is a new S-Works level endurance tire. So James said it fits between the Turbo and the Roubaix. The Roubaix Pro continues in the range. This is basically a S-Works level of the Roubaix Pro, I guess, if you're really trying to summarize up their lineup. So yeah,
Roubaix is more of a training tire, I would say.
It is. Yeah, there's a lot more material to the Roubaix Pros. This is definitely a lot lighter and meant to be faster rolling. But yeah, it's I guess they're equivalent to a bunch of other new tires, like a bunch of Four Seasons style tires that we've seen from other brands recently.
Is it just me, or is anybody else confused by all the talk of speed and endurance in the one sentence, and stuff that just normally doesn't really go together?
It's even more confusing is that none of the pro teams ride this. They all ride the old Turbo Cottons.
Well,
those Turbo Cottons are so good, though.
Actually, the Mondo, every Specialized squad at Paris-Roubaix, and every rider, if I remember correctly, both men's and women's races were on these new Mondo tires. I asked Specialized on the ground why they reused that name, and I was told that just easier to reuse the same name.
Naming is very hard.
And yeah, just and that was so. It struck me because it was so different from the week before, where we literally had almost every tire option available to Specialized teams on show at the Tour of Flanders, and then in Roubaix they were all on this one new tire type. So, and that comes off the back of a spring where we've seen Specialized teams mixing tubulars, tubeless, clinchers across their wheels. So it was interesting to see that they had all conformed on the one tire for Roubaix, and certainly, everybody had tire problems at Roubaix. But I don't remember any specifically on Specialized teams. So that's perhaps an indicator of where this tire is going also, or how this tire performs also. But if you want to. If you want to add a bit more intrigue into it, you've then got Remco in the Giro today, who started the stage on something that looks like these Mondo tires. I can't quite get a photo to see properly exactly what he was on, but the rear tire may or may not have said Mondo. The front tire definitely does not. The front tire just says Project Black, which is Specialized sort of standard comment on newly developed or items still in development.
I just love that Ronan's the only person in the world that uses all 50 megapixels of Corvos photos.
How much more can I zoom in?
Yeah.
How much more?
Yeah. At home, CSI zooming on every single thing. Enhance.
Well, the interesting thing about
it doesn't work like
today,
it does on TV, though.
Strangely not.
No, the enhance really does not. Either that or I'm not using it right, but the really interesting thing about today, though, was when the stage dried up later in the stage, Remco then swapped to a different bike, which seemingly had Turbo Cottons on it. But on both setups, so whether you're using the Mondo, some Project Black new tire we know nothing about, or and eventually with the Turbo Cottons later, he was still running clincher. So it would make sense if he was running these new Mondos in the weather conditions that they had earlier in the stage. Might provide a bit more grip, but more puncture protection. But what doesn't make sense is why he was still riding it with an inner tube. That was the part that sort of stumped me. And the commentators on GCN, they did mention that he had changed from wet weather tires to dry tires, which all of us were sort of scratching our heads about. And I've asked Specialized for comment on and haven't had a reply yet. But yeah, perhaps more tires coming from Specialized. Who knows?
Regardless of whatever was going on with Remco's tires, is anyone else finding it kind of interesting that there's seemingly a lot more attention being paid to kind of like nicer endurance / training-ish tires than there used to be.
Yes, in the tubeless spaces, especially. Like I went years looking for and hoping for such a tire, a tubeless endurance style road tire that didn't puncture at the sight of glass. And it appears that only in the last 12 months, I feel like we've got there. And every brand's now finally come out with something. But it's taken us a while to get here.
It's kind of nice to see, though, because it used to be that you just had like really, really nice tires to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
And then just like kind of a bunch of tires.
Yep. Yeah.
Exactly. These are like the nice tire for normal people.
Yeah.
Yes. The everyday performance tire.
I kind of like this trend, though, because realistically, I mean, like I remember this was years and years ago for, I'm pretty sure this was years ago for another publication. Can't remember how many years ago now. I rack my memory about this. But anyway, I tested a set of Vittoria Corsa speeds. And they were like amazingly fast. Felt so good.
And then you flatted.
I didn't flat yet, but I only did a couple rides on it because I was so terrified of flatting. And then when I got home after the last ride and took the tires off and inspected them, then I realized that I was very close to flatting. But anyway, like in a race on like a prepped course or something like that, they probably would have been amazing. But yeah, there just didn't really seem to be a whole lot of middle ground tires back then, and yeah, there's like a wealth of options at the moment. You've got like Grant Conti has a bunch of good ones, Pirelli, Vittoria now with this Corsa Next and so on. There's just plenty of good choices now.
Yep, no, it's definitely a good trend to see. I guess next I'd like to see prices come back down.
Nonsense.
Yeah, $80 a tire seems kind of high. Well, another thing that just came out recently that is definitely not inexpensive. Chris King, we discovered, is expanding their range of complete wheels. They have a new Aero all-road model. Shoot, Dave, I don't have this info in front of me. Do you have that in front of you? Do you want to run through this one?
It's the ARD 44. So it's Chris King's first in-house road wheel, performance road wheel, should I say. And it's using the fusion fiber technology. So it's actually the first road fusion fiber rim. So that's the thermoplastic rims that are made in Utah. So 44 millimeter depth, thermoplastic construction, hookless, which I know plenty of people won't be super stoked on. It's a 25 mil internal width hookless rim. So a little on the wide side, quite in line with, say, Zip Firecrest wheels. But yeah, it seems like a pretty nice wheel, and it's cool to see this thermoplastic technology meet other disciplines now.
They're fairly light too. I feel like I remember seeing they're like 1,500 grams. Because
most of the thermoplastic
stuff's a bit heavier.
Yeah, it's a 435 gram rim, so it's I mean it's competitive. It's probably a little heavier than other high-end 44 millimeter depth wheels at this price point, but it's not terribly so.
King hubs are definitely not known for being light, so
no. So, but yeah, it's I don't know. I like the thermoplastic trend, so it's cool to see. It's just that it's being expanded upon.
Yeah, and I know one big thing that Chris King in particular has been really one thing that the company really prioritizes, I guess the company and the person, is like if you ever go and visit the Chris King factory, it's very clear that they have a very strong emphasis on kind of environmentalism, sustainability, that sort of thing. And this was well before any of that stuff was kind of trendy.
Yeah.
And one big draw of the way Fusion Fiber, I guess CSS Composites is the parent company. One of the ways that one of the appeals of how they do rims is apparently there's very, very little waste associated with these things because my understanding is they're a little coy on how exactly their process works, I guess for understandable reasons. But my understanding is a lot of this is kind of robotically cut and placed as far as the fibers and in molds and that sort of thing. So they're saying there's very, very, very little material waste. And then whatever waste there is produced after the rim production, they take that stuff and chop it up and make it into short fiber tire levers, which are pretty fancy.
Yep. And likewise, if the rim fails or you crack a rim, it can be sent back and they can repurpose it for the same purpose.
Exactly. Yeah, they just chop it up and make other things out of it, which is pretty neat. But But yeah, so that aspect is pretty cool. And I think it's kind of funny that we're looking at a 44 mil deep rim with a 25 mil internal width. And we're kind of like, ho-humming at the fact that it's like a 430 mil rim weight. Like that's pretty good, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm not disappointed by the rim weight at all. I guess I'm a little reluctant by the rim width and the fact that there are no hooks, which I think will limit market appeal. But yeah, it's anyway. That's for a different conversation that we've had many times already.
Well, I have a set of those inbound apparently for review at some point. Oh. I guess I have to make the decision on if I want to get a set in sooner, then they can get in sooner, but then they'll just be black hubs. But if I wait a couple weeks, I can wait for purple ones.
Should definitely get purple.
That's kind of the way I'm leaning to.
It seems like there's no question.
All right, well that's settled then.
Does purple work on every bike?
I think so.
It's going to work on the bike that these are going to go on, so they're definitely going to work on the
me really
on that
happy
bike.
that they brought purple back.
You know, and it's funny because I'm definitely old enough when I remember purple being in the first time, and I definitely did not have and could not afford enough purple stuff at that time, and I'm looking forward to having another crack at it.
Yeah, okay. Ronan's holding up his inflatable gym ball.
It is very purple,
anodized purple. I know it's not
an anodized purple
anodized.
Swiss exercise ball. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. With no air, it's just a aluminium sphere that they've anodized, right?
Yeah, it's not the most comfortable.
No.
Yeah. Well, right now, Dave, CSS is apparently the only company that's making these thermoplastic rims for all these other companies at the moment.
Yep.
But they clearly have a growing range of clients that they're making rims for. Do you think that this is going to be a continuing trend? Because it is a little bit unusual to have one company making a bunch of rims for other brands right now.
Yeah, my understanding is that potentially there's some patents in the way here, but the main barrier to entry for other competitors, should I say, is just the initial setup cost. So from what I understand, the actual cost of production once you've got all the machinery is very low because it's very, very low human effort, very quick to do, very automated. But the actual initial setup cost is immense and far greater than normal thermoset practices. So I think that's probably why we haven't seen competitors come into the market. I think if CSS can prove the market demand and kind of change market favorability toward thermoplastic, then I suspect we'll probably see some competitors set up in Asia.
I mean, I know there's no other companies in the bike industry making products out of this, but are there other industries that use thermoplastic stuff, or is it mainly like such a new technology that it's not really widely used yet?
If I understand correctly, it's pretty common in automotive and aerospace, actually, I think.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it's used extensively in Formula One as well, which, given that it tends to be a little heavier, might seem strange with the weight focus there, but actually it's for all the compliance benefits or dampenings. I shouldn't say compliance. I should say dampening benefits that it offers within Formula One. That's why it's so popular there. So that's the only use case I know of it elsewhere.
Well, that, and if they need to make a little aero tweak, they can just heat it up with a hairdryer and push things with your thumb.
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how these wheels are, because having ridden a handful of thermoplastic rims, they do actually seem to ride differently than thermoset wheels, which I find pretty intriguing. And so far, it's only been something I've ridden on, I guess, mountain bike rims and gravel rims, and I really wonder how much more pronounced that effect is going to be on a road rim, where that damping could actually prove to be pretty substantial. We'll see. But yeah, we'll find out pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm eager to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, me too. And I'm especially eager to see how purple these hubs are. Moving on. Dave, we have some interesting developments from CeramicSpeed, don't we? Because they've had a few products in their, I call it their UFO line for a little while, but now they're about to have a whole bunch more, aren't they?
Yeah, they've revamped their entire bike care lineup. So we've seen a few brands do this. Silka has also strongly gotten into this game. And yeah, the main thing here is mainly a branding and a visual revamp. So everything now follows the same packaging, the same sort of labeling system. And with that, they've got the UFO Clean remains, which is probably one of the best bicycle degreasers money can buy. They've got their Bearing Clean, which is I was very skeptical when this came out. It's basically a degreaser specifically for bearings, but oh my, it works incredibly well. And it's got sort of like an anti-rust agent as well. So if you don't get all the degreaser out, you don't end up damaging any of the bearings that you can do with more aggressive solvents, and therefore not getting all the grease back into the bearing. They've also got a new bike cleaner, which I guess is kind of in like the muck-off space of things, but knowing CeramicSpeed, it probably does some things better. I have not used that one yet. And then, lube-wise, they've apparently tweaked the formula of the drip dry, but they've also renamed that to be, I believe it's now the All Conditions. They've got a new version of that, which is specifically for indoor riding, which is meant to be less flaky than before. And then there's also a new one coming out, which hasn't quite officially launched yet, but they're going to have a wet conditions wax lube as well. Zach.
I've had the wet lube here in a sample bottle for a while, and I've not, like a couple months, and I've not used it because it's dry here.
So I'm waiting on comment. Ronan, should we discuss this? We're waiting on comment from CeramicSpeed on this because you and I have tested it.
Mm-hmm.
Should we mention our concerns with this product?
Well, I mean, like our findings so far, are not going to change. So we should probably say that we're awaiting comment from CeramicSpeed as to why. Well, in my case at least. Because they delayed.
Sorry, so just to wind back a little bit, this wet lube's not officially out yet because they've actually delayed the launch by a week. But they understand that the product's out in the market, so there's not like a hard embargo. So I think we're still allowed to talk about it. But they hinted at maybe there being a production issue with this lube that they need an extra week to sort, and that had me asking them just to confirm whether the sample lubes we had were potentially somehow different to their end goal, because, and I'll let Ronan explain this one.
Well, I used the new wet drip a couple of occasions and hadn't really noticed all that much. It hadn't actually got wet conditions, so there wasn't all that much to really report. But then I specifically sterilized my chain, did the whole deep clean process that you need to do before you wax a chain that CeramicSpeed recommends for this. Applied the recommended amount, which does feel like quite a lot of this. It's a lot, lube, but you need to like drip every link twice, so twice on top and twice on the bottom. So that's a lot. And then the next day, so it had about 20 hours of drying time, and the next day I did a 104 kilometer road race. And not raining, but wet conditions. So the ground was wet, but it wasn't actually raining at any point during the race, as far as I remember. And with about 30 kilometers to go, I started hearing some chain squeak. And I, first of all, thought it was my chain. And I thought, no, it couldn't be. I've got the wet drip on. So then I started thinking to myself, the suckers in the breakaway with me are going to be losing watts to their squeaky chains. And then I noticed that as the riders rotated around, the squeaking wasn't going away, and it was only on my chain. And I could hear it all the time. And by the time I got to the finish, the chain was it was completely dry. It was, it just hadn't done what I thought it was going to do in those wet conditions. To make matters worse, it was the next day before I got home. I didn't have any lube with me, so by the time I got home the next day, the chain was starting to corrode and all already, which was, on a new Shimano 12-speed chain, really not what I was hoping to see.
Yeah. I won't take us on too much of a tangent, but the 12-speed chains do seem to be a bit more willing to corrode than what you'd expect of a high-end chain.
the thought sort of crossed my mind after the finish, but didn't
Yeah.
really think about it too much. Like, it'll be fine till tomorrow, but it wasn't.
Yeah. No, my experience with this new wet lube is very similar. I got less distance in much harsher conditions. I got caught out in the rain with like 55k on a freshly degreased and re-lubed chain with this stuff, and by 65k, only 15k in very heavy rain, but 65k on the chain, and I too was hearing quite the loud squeak. So I would like to hear back from CeramicSpeed still, but yeah, I mean, early impressions are that this lube isn't living up to the claim, and that I guess it's worth reiterating that I actually think the original, the drip dry, that is now renamed as the All Conditions, is still one of my favorite chain lubes on the market. So I'd like to give CeramicSpeed the benefit of the doubt on this, but yeah, early impressions are not good.
I kind of wonder if they got the wrong label on the wrong bottle. If that was the issue. What was it, a production issue or something?
Yeah, I don't know, but like this one is definitely tackier than the regular.
That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be stickier, right?
Yeah, it's noticeably stickier because I noticed it picking up more grit than what I'd like and what I've seen with the dry version.
Is the idea behind it that it's still faster than a normal oil lube in the wet?
That is the idea. Yes.
Yep.
But is it still faster than a normal oil lube when there's no lube left?
No, my chain really was not faster by the end of that race. But that's actually, you've just reminded me, one of the first things I noticed about it on applying it was just, when you drip on, especially with the Silka Super Secret drip, you drip it onto the chain, but most of it just falls off immediately. With this new CeramicSpeed, it actually does hold to the chain much better until you get to like 3/4 of the way through the application process that it recommends, and then there's just drip everywhere.
The chain can't handle it. Yeah.
yeah.
But the other thing, like, so as Ronan was saying, like, you're basically coating the chain 4 times for an application. At the same time, and this is just so odd to me, CeramicSpeed have basically pitched that they've made the bottles smaller in their chain lube to make the product more affordable, to make it more accessible for everyone. But the other way to look at that is your bottle's smaller, so you've got less chain lube, so you're actually probably paying more per milliliter than with a larger bottle.
I actually chatted with them at Seattle about this.
Yeah.
And, before we give people the impression that CeramicSpeed is actually charging more for this, if I remember correctly, and I'm pretty certain I had this exact discussion with the CeramicSpeed guy at Seattle. The per milliliter cost actually is lower now, despite the fact that the bottle is cheaper. So my understanding is they basically wanted to lower the cost of entry to get into CeramicSpeed chain lube. So instead of having to pay, what was it, like $45 for a bottle or something like that,
sure.
Now it's a smaller bottle, but it's also a lower price,
comparatively cheaper. All right,
and it is lower price slightly per milliliter.
Okay. So, all right, that's good. I'd
but
say
it
more.
Like but it sounds like you still
waste.
have to use a lot of it. So, this I will say that all this discussion is not helping to sway Zach's opinion of wax chain lube.
No, I have no problem with wax chain lube. I mean, this is we could just go down a whole topic, but I just hate that the people that are very pro chain waxing are like, this is the only solution. Everyone should be doing it. If you don't do it, you're an idiot. That's the response that a lot of the chain waxing people do. And that's just not realistic for 98% of the cyclists out there.
Well, 98% is a bit extreme, but
I think it's just the world we live in now, Zach. It's like replace chain wax with any other thing that people do nowadays.
Yeah, totally. It's the same thing. But like, it's the people that are selling the chain wax that are using this argument.
Right. Like it'd be nice if they could just be honest and be like, if you consistently ride in dry conditions and you're pretty decent about keeping things clean and whatnot, and you are willing to do the full prep beforehand, that this stuff is great.
Like I'd use it on my bike most of the time because it's really dry around here and it's great.
Right.
But the moment you ride through like some snow melting across the road or like any sort of moisture, it's absolutely garbage. And
right. So it'd be better if they just came out and said that flat, just admitted it.
I have a confession to make in that I rode indoors today specifically to avoid getting my recently waxed chain wet.
Exactly.
Or did you wax your chain so you had the excuse to ride indoors?
Yeah, you do love to ride inside.
Subconscious thing going on. Maybe?
It's the whole wax thing. I mean, it's not going away. The trend is more and more towards drip waxes that emulate melt-on wax. Like they really are getting that stuff to a point where melt-on wax is becoming less relevant and less required to get these really impressive longevity results. And I know Silka consider wax to be the future of chain lubes. I know CeramicSpeed consider it. So the brands that are, dare I say, actually doing legitimate R&D in the space are only heading in one direction with this stuff. But at the same time, I acknowledge Zach's point, and there are still compromises, and it's still not for everyone.
And I think the drip, like the trend towards making drip wax better is fantastic. Like it's way easier, but I think a lot of people still, they buy it and they're like, oh, you need to clean the chain. Mm-hmm. And most people's idea of cleaning the chain is like the same as cleaning their bike. And they hose it off, maybe use some dish soap or something and like kind of scrub the chain. And it's still this oily chain, and they put this wax on top of it. And then it's a worse than doing just oil-based lube. And I think that there needs to be either more education on this, or like SRAM and Shimano or KMC or someone needs to recognize that, okay, lots of people are waxing chains. What if we sell this one model as a pre-wax chain, and then it's ready to go, and then all you have to do is apply your favorite drip lube on it? Like, I think that would be way easier for people.
There's also the drying time thing, which I find a lot of people, not a lot of people, but I've definitely noticed.
Yeah.
You know, you can't apply like what.
Yeah, for sure. You come back from a ride and you're like, oh, my chain's making a bit of noise. I need to lube that. But by the time you get home, you're cracked and you're just hungry, and you like hang the bike up and forget about it. And then you go to ride the next day and you're like, oh, wait, my chain needs lubing. And then with wax, that doesn't work.
Nope. Not so much.
So definitely, as Zach said, it's an education thing. So that's the biggest inhibitor here. And I'd like to think brands are working toward that, but really, I think it'll be up to the likes of us to do it.
Well, Dave, I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about your experience, and Ronan, your experience about this stuff, and looking forward to hearing what CeramicSpeed has to say. So, Dave, are you going to do a written article on that? Is that the plan?
It's what you wanted. I was waiting to hear back from CeramicSpeed, but generally speaking, I'm not really all that into reviewing single bottles of lube, because without the comparative data, it's just a bit meh.
Paging Adam Kieran.
Yeah, but definitely expect at some point I will get back on the chain lube beat, and at some point you'll hear about this chain lube.
All right. Well, the other part of this, you mentioned that CeramicSpeed kind of is expanding their range of bike care, and Silka has been getting a little bit deeper into this. I kind of find that segment a little bit interesting also, because we certainly have had various bike washes and cleaners and these sorts of things over the years. And it feels like this is another segment where there's like more premium stuff out there, I guess, to describe it that way. Silka certainly is making a big deal out of this, and CeramicSpeed is making a like somewhat bigger deal out of it. Has anyone used this stuff yet? I just got some samples in, so I haven't actually used it yet, but I'm curious if this stuff is as good as it's supposed to be.
I mean, it's not in terms of using it, but in terms of why there's more of it, it seems like it's just a really high margin product that you can make a lot of and sell a lot.
Yeah.
I've no doubt that this is high margin product. But one thing that I'm wondering in particular is, well, first of all, if it does work as well as these various companies are saying it does. But I was having a chat with a buddy of mine, and he's really into cars and bikes, but he's really into cars, and he's also really into like car care. And he was pointing me to a whole bunch of car care products that a lot of these sounded very, very similar, and
weird.
Very odd. And yet they very much claim to do very similar things, and yet they were, although more expensive than some stuff that you would get at like a Target or Walmart or whatever, it was still quite a bit cheaper per fluid volume than the bike stuff. And I'm wondering how different the stuff really is.
Yeah, like credit to Josh Portner of Silka, because he's pretty open about where the origins of a lot of his products come from, and he's not shy to say it's from the automotive world. I mean, there's been huge progression in high-end automotive care as far as like ceramic technology and other durable sort of dirt-resistant coatings. And yeah, Portner's kind of saying he's very much using similar manufacturers to some of the high-end products there. I guess the stipulation that he added is that their products are typically a little bit different because bicycles have sometimes unique demands. So a lot of those car care products don't necessarily need to be they don't need to care for like bearings and rubber seals and carbon fiber and clear coat and fake leather and rubber and everything else that a bicycle has all exposed. Also like dissimilar metals all over a bicycle as well, which again, cars typically avoid fairly well. So yeah, he said there are some unique engineering requirements around making these products better. That said, I have no doubt that a lot of other products in the market are just relabeled. And I think that has always been the case in the bicycle world, is chain lubes and all of that have just been relabeled products from other industries. And if anything, I think these days we're seeing that less. We're seeing real bike-specific products hit the market, which is the case with these chain lubes we're just talking about. So yeah, I think the trend is positive at the moment. And yes, these products are expensive. Yes, they're high margin products. The other thing is they're high turnover products. So for a brand like Silka, bike care is actually very profitable because if you can get a customer to buy your chain lube, they become a customer 4 times a year. So yeah, I think there are many reasons why brands are flocking to this segment, but at the same time, I think we're benefiting through better product.
Right, and the reality is there aren't going to be a whole lot of people making a lot of their own like at-home wax lube setups or like homemade cleaners and that sort of thing. This is not really going to happen too much.
No, not super common. So.
Last bit of product news before we move on to some UCI stuff. And speaking of price, I actually just got a press release today. We were talking the other day about how a couple of companies now have been announcing price decreases for various reasons, or reduced shipping costs, for example, and need to clear out inventory, that sort of thing. But yeah, just got a press release from Salsa saying that they have dropped prices on a whole bunch of bikes. I guess topping out at about $750 on some higher end full suspension mountain bike models. But also like lower price stuff. You have price drops up like $250 on certain models, like Dave, like the aluminum Journeyer gravel bikes that you and I really liked quite a lot. Mm-hmm. Those are a little bit cheaper. Anyway, kind of nice to see that prices are continuing to drop a little bit from various companies, and I still think that this is going to continue to happen as companies need to clear out more stuff.
Yeah, it needs to. So, a good trend. Can I also bring up a very exciting news on new bearing tools?
Oh, tools. Of course, Dave. Of course.
Oh, always. Yes. I think I've teased this one previously, but I like bearing tools. Bearing tools are great.
You should rephrase that statement. You like tools. It doesn't matter.
I do, but the category of bearing tools I find very intriguing. Anyway, so there's a bit of development in terms of bearing removal tools. So specifically in relation to what I would call not necessarily captured, but blocked bearings. So often if you were to take a free hub off a rear wheel, you'd have 2 bearings with a spacer tube sandwiched between them, which kind of joins the 2 bearings together. And that spacer tube can make it really difficult to get behind the bearing to then remove the first bearing. And this has long been a problem. There's been a few tools that sort of let you expand into the bearing and then use a punch to remove them. The other option would be to use like a blind hole bearing remover, which again expands in, and then you have like this slide hammer that you smash the bearing out of. But yeah, 2 new companies have basically in the last week both released quite different products that aim to achieve much the same thing. So Noble Wheels out of the UK, London-based manufacturer, they have a new puller that is basically replicating Chris King's hub tool set with the split ring in the Chris King hub. In the Chris King tool, and yeah, the split ring expands into the bearing, and then there's basically like an acetal cup that sits against the outside, and you wind it all together, and it pulls the bearing out dead straight and really neatly without a hammer. And then there's a company out of Canada, Alt, who are currently, I think they're about to launch this. You can pre-order it now, but they've got a pretty clever idea where they've basically offset this puller. So as you wind it, it slips into behind that spacer tube, and as you wind it works its way around the bearing. Very hard to explain on a podcast, but yeah, I'd say Alt. If you can find that on Instagram or the website, and you have a liking to bearing tools, then check it out.
I dare say that we're soon going to see some sort of written article about this on Escape Collective.
Oh, you bet.
Okay. All right. Well, stay tuned for that one. Anyway, enough with product talk right now. Ronan, in the last episode, we talked a little bit about a new equipment registration process from the UCI. What have you managed to find out since then? Like, what did we determine anything from the UCI about all this?
Yes and no. Yes, in that it's seemingly definitely happening ahead of this year's Tour de France, because that draft document has now become some sort of a final document and is published on the UCI's website, which suggests to me that it's definitely happening. It's up there with the other. It's on the equipment page of the UCI website for anybody who's looking for it. You'll find it in my bookmarks bar, and it's right beneath the same registration process that they use for track and Olympic track. So yeah, seems like it's happening, but strangely, the UCI had this time last week promised us a comment on the draft document that we had. That was delayed another day or two after we spoke in the podcast. Long story short, I sort of said, well, here, look, we're going to have to publish what we have here. At one point, I was told that the response was delayed because the respondee was on a plane. I'm not sure for how long, but this was going on for days. And then finally, I was told that the UCI couldn't provide a comment because the document is now public, and that I'm trying to confirm exactly why the draft document, I could understand that they couldn't comment on that, but from what I can establish, they're probably going to make some announcement themselves about this before the Tour de France.
Sounds like
probably want to keep it for
UCI.
that.
It still blows my mind that they're
UCI.
using the Tour de France to test this.
Why not do it at some smaller event and just
like Dauphiné or something like that, and see how it goes?
I can imagine that they
then
just would not get this by the teams for anything other than the Tour de France, because it's such a huge workload for all the teams. They just, if you try to enter just for, I don't know, GP Marseillais or something like that, that's not going to happen. And then also, unless it's World Tour, you end up with a mixture of Conti, Pro Conti, World Tour teams, and Conti and World Tour on the women's side, and then those teams would have to conform to something that they would not. They're ultimately not participating in the Tour de France. So ultimately, where the UCI wants to roll this out, they wouldn't even be there. So I guess you couldn't really ask them to conform to this process. What just still baffles me is that they've decided upon this in April and want to roll it out for this year's Tour de France. It's like, if it was next year's Tour de France, then okay, there is. I genuinely think there's some good in what they're trying to do here. It just all seems a little rushed for me.
Mm-hmm.
Have you talked to any of the teams or mechanics or anyone?
Yeah. None of which want to be named. But I spoke to a couple of teams, a mechanic, like a team liaison, and a manufacturer, and all of them cursed multiple times.
I mean, what happens if all the teams come together and are like, we don't want to do this?
I was actually just going to ask the same question.
You probably won't get all the teams coming together because presumably, I don't know, Cofidis or Intermarché or something maybe don't mind if Ineos can't rock up with 4 or 5 new sets of wheels and new helmets or whatever, or Jumbo can't, land with whatever new technology they have. So you're probably not going to get a whole pile of agreement on it. Although that said, it would probably, favor the smaller teams not to have to do it because, the likes of Jumbo and that can just throw money at, or maybe not Jumbo, but UAE and Ineos can probably throw money at having a compliance officer or something like that who just ensures that everything is registered. But yeah, the one manufacturer I spoke to are developing, or not even developing, they've effectively finished a new bike that they hope to introduce just ahead of the Tour de France and have used at the Tour de France. And right now they have no idea whether or not their team will be permitted to ride this bike, and the bars and the wheels and everything that's going with it.
We touched on this in last week's episode, but this whole thing doesn't necessarily solve the problem that they're trying to solve. You mentioned that they're going to weigh products as a way of verification against actual approved product. Do you have any insight on what that looks like what sort of variance they allow? Because there's normally like a 5 maybe 10% variance in some production products in terms of actual weight.
If you took the smallest frame and the biggest frame and weighed them and got the heaviest, biggest one, the lightest, smallest one, maybe then 10%, but 10% from, across the same size, 2 different frames in the same size seems unlikely to me. But that, thinking about that sense, that, kind of also just strikes me how sort of, let's say, old school the UCI are, that if they're really worried about teams turning up with lighter frames and the frame is, even if it is, I don't know, 300-400 grams lighter, which it's not even going to be that, but say it's 100 grams lighter, it's not going to be a performance gain. It's not going to make that team any faster. It's like, focus your energies and your resources on something that will make a difference.
Like Sockeye.
Should they maybe focus on having more reliable measurement jigs?
I think you're referring to the sort of fiasco that unfolded ahead of the first stage of the Giro. Is that right, James?
I most definitely am. What happened there?
Basically, the UCI turned up on Saturday morning and realized that the time trial jig that RCS, the Giro organizers, have was corroded and wasn't measuring accurately for whatever reason. There wasn't basically a text message came out from Michael Rogers, who's head of innovation at the UCI, saying, we've had this problem. We think it's corrosion on the magnetic track that the device uses for measurement that's causing the problem. We're not sure, but we can't use it either way. We're looking into it. In the meantime, Team Cofidis have lent us their jig, and we will be doing only the time trial bike checks immediately before the rider goes to the start line. So normally at big races like this, they have a check at, say 9, 10 a.m. in the morning, and then another one immediately before the rider goes on to the start ramp. And the morning check is supposed to just check everything's compliant. There's not going to be any last minute surprises. And then the evening or the pre-start check is just for the UCI to make sure you haven't checked anything or changed anything in between.
Yeah.
So there was only going to be the pre-start check at the Giro, and because Cofidis jig was the old one prior to last year's new jig that the UCI introduced, the UCI actually had to increase the tolerances that they would permit for teams to fall outside of, rather than have someone caught out on the start line. So it was all just a bit of a mess. And putting two and two together, my theory is that the last time this jig was used was at Tirreno Adriatico, which was pouring rain that day. And someone hasn't really cleaned it and dried it off properly before they put it away. And when they took it out for the Giro, it's been all rusted up and corroded.
Whoops. Used hard and put away wet.
Following all this, the question was, what could the UCI have done better? And I, for once, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on this. I think they've actually handled a pretty pretty unlucky situation as best they could on the spot, you know. And the question a lot of people have was, well, should the UCI not be bringing their own jig if it's them who want the rules enforced? And while I can completely see that argument and actually agree with it, I also just know that for commissaires traveling from here, there, and everywhere, it's not always, you know, these things are big devices. Like this isn't a tape measure and a spirit level. It's a pretty big piece of equipment. So it probably just makes sense that it travels with the race organizers, you know, trucks and everything that they have going to whatever race they're going to be organizing. I don't know what the answer is. They probably need some sort of backup device, but it's probably also not the answer to send it with commissaires or send trucks specifically from Switzerland to wherever a time trial might be happening to carry a jig that doesn't really seem to work either.
I mean, it seems like they could have just sent a message like a week or two in advance, being like, "Hey, Giro starts with a time trial. Can we double check that the jig's still working?" Not be like, "Oh, it's the morning of."
Well,
what do we do with that?
The good news is this is the UCI, so there will be a full review conducted and lessons learned and new strategy implemented, and you know it'll all be fixed by the time we get to the time trial on Sunday.
That is very confidence inspiring.
The UCI should travel with a jig, which just just measures, like it just confirms the calibration of the jig on location. Right. They could actually travel with that. I mean, all you'd need is some measuring rods, but I don't know. For me, that's maybe that's the solution.
I couldn't believe it, where it was like almost to the day a year on from when they launched this new jig. It was like the 2nd of May last year, and it was the 3rd. No, well, yeah. Anyway, it was like literally one day after the 1 year anniversary of this new jig getting released that it failed them kind of when it mattered most.
I love this so much because for me it's like the time that we like the once a year where we have more than like the number of guests that our dining room table can seat. So you go down to like the storeroom and you pull out your folding chairs and you're like, oh no, they're moldy, and it's always like, you know, half an hour before everyone arrives. That's what happened. But yeah, anyway, it's just so good.
I mean, it's also so much up to like who's using the jig. Like I've been at time trial and you take the bike in the morning just to make sure everything passes, right? And it does. And then you go up to the start ramp and they check it again. And they're like, oh, actually, this doesn't pass. You need to move the saddle back a centimeter or something. You're like, but I was here 3 hours ago and the jig said it was fine.
Yeah. And they're like, well, you're here now and it doesn't pass.
Yeah.
That's the idea so much of this new jig is that there's theoretically that it's much more accurate. There's no real user error. Or opportunity for user error from what
I broken after being around for a year.
I haven't actually seen it myself, but it uses lasers and algorithms, if I remember the press release correctly. Whereas the old one used cigars and glasses, I think.
Well, clearly lasers and algorithms have no potential for error, obviously. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. All right, that's enough for this part here. We're running a little bit long, and I am curious. Dave, what do you have on your mind this week?
Bearing extraction tools. Partly
bearing
because
extraction? We just talked about bearing extraction.
Sorry. I still have bearing extraction tools on my mind. No, actually fastener extraction tools have been on my mind, as well as bearing extraction. Just extracting things. Poor Richie, he also had something extracted, but let's not go there. No, so fastener extraction. I bought a new set of fastener extractors, bolt removers, out of curiosity, and I put them on Instagram. And then a mate of mine was like, "Oh, you should get this one. This one's the way to go because this is what we use in the workshop all the time." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll take his word. He works in big industry. Used to work for a high-end car manufacturer." So I was like, all right, I'll do it. I bought it, sent him a photo, like, got it. And he's like, oh, great. Can you let me know how they are? I've never used them. So anyway, after that stitch up, I've just been on my mind is fastener extraction. And I've also seen on our Discord, our member-only Discord, a bit of occasional banter and chat about removing bolts once they strip out. And I guess what's on my mind is that the best fastener extractor is just better tools and better techniques that prevent you from ever needing to use a bolt extractor, because all the bolt extractors are kind of painful to use. If you're having to get a drill bit out and then actually extract a broken bolt, all of them suck. So I think what's on my mind is that people should really think through how they're removing bolts, whether the tool has a snug fit, whether they're loading up the bolt to stop the tool from camming out of it, whether the bolt is frozen and what they can do to potentially unfreeze that bolt before they apply a large amount of torque to it. And all else fails, I would say there are still tools that will work with rounded bolt heads and that kind of thing that should stop you from having to drill into that bolt. If you're drilling into a bolt, that's a very, very last resort, and things have gone quite bad, and there were probably a few steps that you missed along the way.
Dave, can I recommend a bolt extraction tool that I'm sure you don't have?
Mm.
I actually caught this on a mechanics forum that I'm a member of. Someone in a shop, clearly a very well-equipped shop, but someone in a shop had an issue with a stripped bolt. Mm-hmm. And instead of trying to drill a hole in it and trying to use a conventional bearing extractor or slotting the head or anything like that, they spot welded a piece of metal onto the stripped head, and it worked wonderfully.
Yeah, not ideal for like say a Shimano shifter body or something like that. If you've got a blade,
you just have to be very, very careful with the welder. Very careful. Very, very careful.
So for those people that have, say, stripped out the bolt head and now can't get any purchase in it, my favorite go-to is called Socket Out. It's an American-made product, and it's basically a wedge-shaped hex key, or they do Torx as well. It's basically a wedge-shaped hex key, so you kind of hammer it in, and it wedges itself in place, and then you just unwind the bolt. And that has only failed me once or twice. Every other time I've managed to get the bolt out pain-free with that thing. So they're expensive, pretty much impossible to find outside the US. I had to pick mine up in the US. It's one worth looking for.
It's called, is it Socket Out or Sock Out?
Sock it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
McMaster also sell them. So not that I can order from them either, but anyway.
All right then. Well, let's I did have a PSA, but in the interest of time, I think we're just going to go ahead and wrap it up at this point because, as I mentioned earlier, we're running quite long, and I don't want to lose anybody here because we still have a pretty good announcement to make. Oh, Ronan, hold on. Ronan's got a thought.
I have one thing on my mind that I just want to share to put it on other people's minds that we don't need to discuss, but one of the things that popped into my mind today, we hear a lot about heat training and core body temperature and all that, and how you want to pre-cool to improve performance. And I was just wondering if you could pre-cool with ice cream, because that seems to me like
definitely.
the best. Would it be effective for performance? Because it would definitely be the tastiest option.
Yeah, as long as you're not lactose intolerant, I could see it being.
I'm sure there's an option there too.
Well, Ronan, I think clearly this question requires some research, because I think you need to get one of those internal temperature monitors, and then you need to ingest
copious amounts of ice cream.
I don't know. What did you say? Some obscene amount of ice cream before a critical time trial or so, and then see if it has a positive effect on your core temperature, as well as a positive effect on your race performance. So why don't you go ahead and get going on that, and you can report back to us.
Will do right now.
Okay. All right. Anyway, as I was saying, we do have a big announcement to make because next week's Geek Warning is going to be a live recording in front of our private Discord audience. If you're a member of the Escape Collective, you can go ahead and hop into our private Discord channel and become a member of our live audience for next week's Geek Warning. It's going to be a Ask a Wrench episode where we may have just a little bit of news, but we are essentially just going to be asking or having participants ask a whole bunch of wrenching questions. And that panel will include Dave and myself and Zach, and Brad Copeland is going to be with us as well. Brad, I think many of you will recognize from the World Cup mountain bike circuit. He's a pretty well-known mechanic and should have answers to a whole lot of questions. So anyway, if you are not yet a member of the Escape Collective, please go ahead and sign up, because then you gain access to that Discord channel and a whole bunch of other things, not to mention all the content on Escape Collective .com now, not just .cc. We have secured the .com domain, and we can go ahead and go public with that. So that's really good news. And if you are already a member, thank you very much. If you like what you hear on the podcast here, I think we don't really remind people about this enough. Please go ahead and head over to iTunes and give us a rating or a review, because it really does help us find more people, find a bigger audience for this show. And because you maybe have noticed that we have no ads on this podcast, and we're gonna keep Geek Warning ad free. So right now, Geek Warning is going to be purely member funded. So in order to keep things going, we need more members to fund it. So again, if you're already a member, thanks. If you're not, please consider signing up. And with that, thanks for listening to this week's show. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.